You believe you have charted the course of your narrative, only to have an unexpected visitor arrive and challenge you to reshape it entirely. 14 months have passed since I laid my husband to rest. It has been 9 months since my stepson posed a question that dismantled the very principles I believed defined my existence. I long to declare that I turned it down. Yet sorrow does not render one innocent. It defines your humanity, unfiltered, revealed. Yearning for something, anything to break the stillness, grief whispers softly. It remains unspoken. It remains a haunting presence, within the quietude of the dwelling, within the unkempt confines of the half-made bed, in the cup of coffee brewed for someone who has long since departed, my beloved husband, Richard. He lacked cruelty, merely remote. He consistently expressed more through his work than he ever did in conversation with me. In his passing, it was not merely him that slipped away from my grasp. It was the incarnation of myself that lingered in his presence. To my surprise, it was Daniel, my stepson, who stepped into that role. Yet he made his appearance. He remained. He caught sight of me. One fateful night, he posed a question that no son ought to ever utter. Yet his words lacked the warmth of a son. He expressed it with the confidence of a man. I did not express my agreement. Initially, it wasn't the case. Yet I did not utter a refusal either. For those who have lingered in the shadows for far too long, any form of attention, even if misguided, can illuminate the darkness. Thus it all commenced, not with affection, not even with desire. Yet there exists a loneliness, dense, silent, and yearning. Join us at Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where storytelling transcends mere narration. We explore the secrets concealed within the depths of the human heart. Remain by my side. What transpired next? I remain unable to articulate it completely. However, I shall reveal all to you. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Camille. For a span of 15 years, I shared my life with Richard as his wife. He possessed great strength. Quiet, the sort of man who traversed the world as if he were a sealed portal. Sturdy, reliable, yet it is never simple to unveil. He was not devoid of kindness. He offered, safeguarded, scheduled. Yet, I can't recall the last moment he gazed at me as if I were anything beyond a mere fixture of the home. Our marriage was not characterized by conflict. It was enveloped in silence. At times, the absence of sound can be even more haunting. Richard's passing was devoid of theatrics. There were no final words spoken. There were no hands held, only a simple phone call. Merely an emptiness. The funeral unfolded in hushed tones. Seems appropriate, I suppose. A small number of individuals. Less weeping. I watched as everyone else moved forward, leaving me behind. Then came Daniel, the son of Richard from his first marriage. At 21, he possessed a quiet demeanor reminiscent of his father, yet there was a gentler quality to him, more tender, in greater attendance. Our bond was never strong, not in a manner that fosters connections. Merely courteous interactions, brief gatherings during festive occasions. Until Richard's passing, subsequently he began to appear with greater frequency. Initially, I believed it was a matter of obligation. Yet it transformed into something entirely different. He began to mow the lawn unprompted, repairing various elements within the home, hauling in the bags of groceries, sitting across from me at the dinner table as if he had always been meant to be there. I accepted it without hesitation, for the presence of another was a balm against the consuming void. Grief remained unspoken between us. We engaged in conversation about the small details, the atmospheric conditions, the correspondence. Yet beneath the surface, another force was quietly taking shape. I started to observe the way he remained at the table long after the last bite had been taken. His gaze lingered on me, unlike that of a typical stepson. But as a man observes a woman he has yet to understand. On a quiet evening, my hand sought the salt. He extended his hand as well. Our fingers grazed each other. A chuckle escaped my lips, claimed it was insignificant. Yet, as time passed, that touch lingered in my memory. I convinced myself it was merely a coincidence. I envisioned the stillness. Yet, beneath the surface, I was aware. Perhaps it was never a matter of chance. Perhaps the transformation was already in motion. And I let it unfold. One evening following dinner, we found ourselves on the couch. A classic film flickered on the screen. A cherished choice of Richard's. He once had a deep affection for silent films, the kind where feelings resonated powerfully even in silence. The chamber was shrouded in shadows, only the soft glow of the screen illuminating our features. We were not in contact. We were not even exchanging words. Yet, the stillness that lingers between us, it was no longer devoid of substance. It was dense, conscious. I extended my hand toward the remote. Daniel also did. Our hands brushed lightly against each other, yet that was not the conclusion. His fingers remained steady. They remained, gently pressed against my own. Cozy. Undoubtedly, my gaze fell upon him, prepared to grin and let it go. But when our eyes met, he wasn't gazing at me as a father would at his son, not in a childish manner. He regarded me with the gaze of a man who had made up his mind, and then he uttered those words. Utterly silent. A secret intended solely for that fleeting instant. Camille, solitude need not be your companion any longer. I withdrew my hand softly. Departed, not due to its humor, but rather from a lack of alternatives. It was filled with tension and discomfort. A fleeting getaway, yet within me, a sensation began to awaken. Not a longing. Not at this moment, a weightier matter. Acknowledgement. He had outgrown the innocence of boyhood. It had been some time since he last ventured there. And I remained a woman, continuing to draw breath. Yet, I found myself yearning for that which I had feigned to overlook. I wondered if perhaps it was merely the voice of grief echoing in my mind. Perhaps he longed for his father, mistaking that deep-seated yearning for something entirely different. Perhaps I did as well. I attempted to convince myself that it held no significance. It was merely a stroke of luck. He didn't intend for it to come across as it did. Yet, the gaze he cast upon me following that night, it revealed all that I needed to know. It was not confusion, it was purposefully directed. And the part of me that ought to have been appalled remained untouched. This was not my desire, yet I did not intervene either. For in that fleeting contact, a sensation washed over me, one I hadn't experienced in years. Noted. That night I found myself unable to sleep, merely gazing at the ceiling, contemplating the essence of his voice, the manner in which he uttered my name. His gaze upon me was profound. Could it have been mere kindness? Or perhaps something more profound? A truth I found difficult to acknowledge. I pondered it repeatedly, letting the thoughts swirl in my mind. I am attempting to persuade myself that it was all in good faith. He was merely a young man enveloped in grief, extending solace to another who shares the same fractures. Yet the reality? I loathe myself for even entertaining the thought. The act of wondering signified that I too was capable of feeling something profound. Yet, I possessed no justification for it. Yet, this is the aspect that often goes unspoken. Grief transcends mere tears. It ignites a longing within you. Contact, embracing warmth, bond, a gentle nudge to acknowledge your existence. Since Richard's passing, no one had ever regarded me in such a manner. Not even prior to his passing. To speak candidly, Daniel maintained his boundaries. He did not lay a hand on me in an inappropriate manner. His words flowed with a gentle tenderness and thoughtful consideration. Yet, I began to observe the frequency with which he sought out opportunities to be close to me. How he remained in the kitchen after dinner, savoring the moment. How he would linger just a bit too near while offering me a cup of tea. He began selecting groceries, including my favorite snacks that I hadn't even requested, alluding to recollections that were never ours to hold, highlighting the subtle details that Richard overlooked. On a seemingly ordinary afternoon, I found myself in the unfortunate predicament of dropping a glass. It broke into countless pieces on the kitchen floor, and I found myself paralyzed in that moment, for grief transforms even the tiniest details into monumental burdens. He entered quietly, knelt, and gathered each fragment in silence. As he raised his gaze to meet mine, he remarked, "You're doing better than you think, Camille." And I felt the urge to weep, not due to my faith in his words. Yet, it was essential for me to hear those words spoken aloud. The change became increasingly difficult to overlook. He would steal glances at me, convinced I was oblivious to his gaze. I would hear the sound of his footsteps come to a halt just outside my bedroom door, then proceed after a brief interlude. What could possibly be more disheartening? I let it unfold. I reassured myself that it was merely a figment of my imagination. I found myself delving into it, driven by a sense of solitude. It was grief casting shadows in places where light once thrived. Yet, on a particular night, a laugh escaped me, stirred by something unexpected. It was merely a light-hearted remark he offered. He gazed at me and remarked, "You are beautiful when you laugh." I chose not to correct him. I refrained from reminding him of my role as his stepmother. I chose not to feign shock or offense. I smiled. That smile, that fleeting moment, marked the inception of all that followed. That fateful night, when the power flickered and then vanished, everything transformed. A tempest approached with alarming swiftness, the sort that electrifies the atmosphere long before the first rumble of thunder breaks the silence. The lights danced momentarily before plunging into darkness. I discovered a collection of candles and arranged them thoughtfully throughout the living room. The gentle illumination enveloped the surroundings in a serene hush. More personal. He proposed to remain, merely until it subsided, said he didn't want me alone in the dark. I chose not to engage in a dispute. We settled on the floor, our backs resting against the couch, enveloped in silence and the soft glow of flickering light. The only sounds were the tempest raging outside and the unintentional harmony of our breathing, gradually aligning in a quiet rhythm. Our conversation began. About Richard, concerning all that remained unspoken. He expressed a longing for more moments shared with his father. But then he paused and added, "I wish I had more time with you." I looked at him, unsure what to say. He made no effort to pause. He remarked, "I witnessed the way he treated you. I have always perceived it. He never regarded you with the admiration you truly warranted. I never truly paid attention. I hated it. Camille, you were worthy of so much more." His voice carried no trace of anger, only sorrow. Not intended for his father. For my own sake. In that moment he extended his hand. Leisurely. Proceed with caution, deliberate. He grasped my hand. Not as it once was. It was no mere coincidence. Not a momentary touch. This moment was intentional. He grasped it with a sense of purpose. I remained steadfast, refusing to withdraw. I ought to have. Every thought in my mind was clamoring for me to take action. Yet my heart lay in stillness. The silence spoke volumes far beyond any justification I might have offered. Our lips never met. We refrained from any other form of contact. Yet, the gaze he cast upon me felt like a threshold being crossed. A decision. I did not halt at one. His thumb glided softly across the back of my hand. In that fleeting moment, I let my eyelids drift shut. Simply to experience something genuine. I felt compelled to urge him to go. To tell him we couldn't keep doing this. Yet, I refrained. Instead, I remained seated, allowing him to embrace me in that subtle, unvoiced manner. As the tempest subsided and the illumination returned, he released his grip gradually, but the space between us was no longer innocent. He rose, bid goodnight, and strolled to the guest room as if nothing had transpired. I lingered in that moment, my palms still radiating warmth from where his had rested. I lay down that night, harboring a tempest within me far more tumultuous than the one raging beyond my window. And yet, as dawn broke, I found myself preparing breakfast for him. Whisked and cooked to perfection, the eggs take on a fluffy, golden hue. Toasted bread, golden and crisp. The coffee prepared just as he preferred it. I remained silent about the events that had transpired. He did not either. Yet, a change had occurred. It was a truth we both understood. It transpired on a Thursday. A serene day unfolds. It arrives without a hint of forewarning. As I meticulously folded the laundry by the window, my gaze caught sight of him arriving. In his hand, he held a bouquet of white lilies, the very flowers that Richard cherished most. He entered, declaring that they were intended for the grave. Yet, in that moment, he extended them towards me. "You ought to possess them," he remarked. You provided him with a stability that no one else could match. I seized them. A smile graced my lips. Words eluded me. He trailed behind me into the kitchen as I busied myself with filling a vase. The silence that lingered between us had become a well-known companion, yet it felt more burdensome than ever. I set the flowers down and turned to express my gratitude to him. He advanced with measured intent. There was no sense of urgency. Make no abrupt gestures. Only intimacy. Deliberate. Indisputable. He extended his hand, gently tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. And I remained unyielding. I ought to have taken action. I ought to have spoken up. Yet, I refrained. His hand lingered, fingertips softly tracing the line of my jaw. As his lips grazed my cheek, time seemed to stand still. Not from a place of fear, but rather from a sense of being desired. Unnecessary. Unblemished. Seeking, he lingered in that moment, his breath a gentle warmth brushing against my skin. Anticipating. Presenting me with the option, and for a fleeting moment, just a single heartbeat, I allowed it to unfold. His lips sought out mine. Gentle, uncertain. A kiss laden with all that we ought to have left unspoken. It lacked fervor. It unfolded unexpectedly. Yet it contained every silent thought we had both choked down for what felt like an eternity. Yearning, heartache, bewilderment, remorse, entwined in a singular instant that was never meant to be. I was the one to pull away first. Trembling, filled with a sense of shame, I found myself unable to meet his gaze. I averted my gaze, struggling to regain my breath. In the depths of my mind, I seek to unearth the essence of my former self. Yet, in that moment, I caught his whisper, a confession of desire that had lingered in the shadows for what felt like an eternity. And a fragment of my being broke apart. In that instant, it became clear to me that this revelation had not come upon him unexpectedly. This was no mere oversight. Or perhaps an error. This had been brewing for some time. Unhurried. Silence reigns, deliberate. And I had allowed it to happen. I expressed to him that this was not something we could pursue. It was indeed a mistake. We had traversed a boundary that was irrevocably set in place. My voice faltered midway through the sentence, yet I clung to the words as if they possessed the power to reverse the past. He remained unyielding. There was no dispute. He merely stood there, gazing at me as if the rules I was attempting to adhere to were entirely foreign to him. Then he inquired why. Not with fury. A mere stillness of bewilderment. "You're not my mother," he declared. "You have never been. You are the sole individual who has genuinely perceived my essence." And I found myself at a loss for words. Because a part of me yearned to shout, "That's not the essence of it." However, the other aspect, the aspect that had remained unseen for an eternity, grasped those words as if they were a vital lifeline. I averted my gaze before he could catch sight of the tears welling in my eyes. I instructed him to leave. He departed in silence without uttering a single word. Once more, the house succumbed to a profound silence. 3 days slipped away. Then there were 4. Silence reigns with no calls to break the stillness. No texts. Only void remains. I persuaded myself that this was the preferable path. The distance would conceal the error. In time, the sharpness of that moment would be smoothed away. Yet, on the 5th day he returned. I heard the knock, opened the door, and there he stood. Alongside her, a young girl. Youthful, radiant and full of life, grasping his arm as if it were her rightful place. He offered me a smile. Courteous, disengaged. He presented her as his girlfriend. Her name was of no consequence. It was her presence that made the difference. Her voice was gentle and quiet. Delightful. She praised the house. She mentioned that she had heard a great deal about me. I inclined my head in agreement. He smiled. Feigned. Yet, he never met my gaze. Never. He settled beside her on the couch, a familiar spot where our conversations once flowed freely. Shared laughter with her in the kitchen, a place where he often found himself lingering just a bit too long, and I found myself standing there, observing, fading softly in the delicate void that lies between recollection and existence, that ought to have brought a sense of resolution. Yet it did not. It seemed akin to a form of retribution. It was as though he sought to obliterate the past, attempting to substitute me instead. What could possibly be the most disheartening aspect? It was successful. Have I overstepped my bounds? Or did I merely permit myself to experience emotions I had concealed for far too long? On certain days, I persuaded myself it was merely a lapse in strength. On other days, I find myself pondering whether there was something more profound at play. An artifact from a bygone era. A presence that had lingered silently in the shadows of my existence. I find myself pondering whether Richard would feel a sense of shame towards me. If he would only shake his head in silence, just as he always did. Or perhaps he might have grasped the essence of it all, comprehended the sensation of standing next to another for years, yet experiencing a profound sense of solitude. Comprehended the experience of residing in a home brimming with dialogues that never truly connected with you. The impact of silence on a woman. I often reflect on those nights spent in bed next to him, feigning that the icy distance separating us was just a part of the ordinary. That love was never meant to evoke a sense of emptiness. When Daniel reached out to me, even with just a glance, it felt as though someone had finally thrown open a window in a house I hadn't realized had succumbed to darkness. It was never about him. Not quite. It revolved around the essence of visibility, moved, selected. At times, sorrow does not elevate one's character. It evokes a sense of desperation. In that moment of despair, you grasp at any semblance of warmth, even if it sears your very soul. That moment's significance to him remains a mystery to me. Perhaps it was a deep yearning. Perhaps it was a matter of misunderstanding. Perhaps it was merely a misaligned resonance of the affection we once shared. Yet for me it served as a reflection, a contemplation of all the words I hesitated to voice. All that I had persuaded myself was unnecessary. In that reflection, I found no trace of a villain. I observed a woman weary of fading into oblivion. Have you ever found yourself making a decision, not out of desire, but rather from an inability to refuse? Not due to a sense of correctness, but rather because it marked the first occasion in an extended period where something truly evoked any feeling whatsoever? Did I err in allowing that moment to unfold? Or was I merely a soul yearning to be acknowledged once more? At times, I find myself revisiting it in my thoughts. The soft brush of lips, a whisper of intimacy. The gaze in his eyes. The stillness that ensued, not out of longing, but as a reminder that I still existed in this world. Was it perhaps an act of betrayal? Or was it merely a plea for connection from two souls abandoned by the same man? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I do not claim to possess the solutions. All I possess are the fragments, the fleeting instances, the decisions I cannot undo. If narratives such as this resonate with your spirit, prompting reflection and a sense of connection in your own inquiries, then consider liking this video and subscribing to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. In this space, we weave narratives that resonate. We explore the depths of the human heart. Certain individuals enter your existence to mend your spirit, to assist you in finding your breath once more, to provide illumination in a moment when you lost the ability to seek it. Some individuals do not arrive with the intent to mend. They arrive to unveil, to reveal the fissures you endeavored to conceal, the void you have come to accept as part of your existence, the pain you've been deeming ordinary. The bond that existed between Daniel and me, it was not love. It was a profound sense of isolation, adorned in the warmth of someone else's love, bound by sorrow, illuminated by the flicker of unvoiced desire. And yet, a fragment of my mind continues to ponder. Should the opportunity arise once more, would I respond in the affirmative? I'm uncertain. Perhaps that is the most challenging reality of all. Exercise caution in your choices when navigating the shadows. At times they leave you behind. At times they draw you closer, more profound than you intended to descend.